Hey everybody, today I want to do a very quick tutorial just walking you through some of the basic audio functionality in Premiere. This is not going to be comprehensive, but just some things to get you started and some of the basic tools to use within audio. So first I want to point out a couple settings that might be of use to you. I'm going to show these on the Mac. They would be in the equivalent places on a PC. First off, under the preferences, if I go to timeline, you'll see I have all these different settings. And just one thing to check here is this default audio tracks. This will tell you when you bring in audio, by default, how is Premiere going to treat that? So I have mine set so that any type of audio I bring in, whether it's mono, stereo, multi-channel, whatever, it's going to treat it all as mono and let me work with all the individual tracks by themselves. And most of the time, this is going to be what we want if you're working with audio from a camera or a sound recorder or something like that. You want any track on there that you can work with independently, and you might want to remove some tracks or change the levels on the tracks differently. Sometimes you will want to leave things in the form that they are, and I'll show you how to change those. The other setting in my preferences I may want to check is under audio hardware. And this is just a note if you're trying to record audio into Premiere directly. So let's say you were trying to record a voiceover directly into the system. You would need to set your input here for what it would be. And then also on your output, I know this is something that occasionally screws people up if they are working in Premiere and plug in their headphones or have Bluetooth headphones. They're trying to play it through a projector or something like that, and there's no audio. This is where you go to change that. So you can change where is this outputting the sound to. In this case, these are set correctly, so I'll leave those. So let's take a look at a piece of audio. Let me bring in this clip here. This is from one of our in-class shoots in production 2. And I'm just going to go to a little chunk here. I'll set an in and out point. I'm going to drag this in. One thing you're going to note with audio, you might be used to with video in Premiere. I can just sort of click here and I can drag this down and see what's there. With audio, that doesn't work that way. If I drag here, it's starting to drag my timeline instead. What I actually want to do is grab this little waveform icon down here. It says drag audio only. You'll notice there actually is a video one next to it for drag video only. Obviously in an audio only clip that is grayed out. I can't do that. But I'll take this and drag this audio in here. I will note this shows up if I go back to a video clip. Now this is showing. So if I drag up here, it's going to grab the picture and the sound. You can see there's a bunch of audio tracks in there. If I wanted to just grab the picture, I could grab up here and just grab that and not bring in that audio. So I have some options there. But let's look at this audio clip here. Let me just blow this up a little bit. And you can see there's a whole bunch of tracks here. And in this case, I do want to treat them independently. It looks like actually there is nothing on this track. You can see it's empty. These are my solo and mute buttons here. So if I solo a track, I will just hear that track. If I mute a track, I won't hear it. So I'm going to unlink these. So I'll turn off linked selection. And I don't need this track at all. It's got nothing in it. And I happen to know that these tracks are a sort of mix of the other two tracks. So I'm going to delete those. So I just have these original two. And we can hear they're actually a little bit different. So here's one.
Hey.
Just a simple line there. Somebody says,
Hey.
hey. And that sounds like that's probably from a lav mic. And this was probably the boom mic.
Hey.
So you can hear the hey gets picked up on both, but the boom was also picking up some more of the background traffic and stuff. So I have these two different tracks here, and I might want to treat them differently. I might want to say just keep one or just keep the other or mix them together, whatever I want to do. But that's what I mean by treating these both as mono. Now, sometimes I may want something treated as stereo. Here's a music track I brought in. And in this case, so it's treating it as two mono tracks, but really that's not what I want. This was a recorded music track. It's actually stereo left and right. So I want whatever's in this channel to come out of the left speaker and whatever's in this channel to play out of the right speaker, rather than treating them as two independent mono tracks. The way I can change that is go over to my clip here. I can right click on it, go to the modify menu and say I want to modify the audio channels. And here you can see how it's set up, and it says, what's the format for this? Mono. And I'm saying I want this to be stereo. Okay, so you can see now it says clip 1 now has a left going to the left and right going to the right. And I actually want this to just be one clip. The issue that happened when I first changed this, and we were in mono, it said, okay, there's actually two clips here. There's a mono one and a mono the other. And I'm going to make this stereo so that they both go into clip one. And then I don't actually need clip two. So I'm going to say, just make this into one clip with a left channel and a right channel. And let's keep it as that. And so now when I bring this clip back into my timeline, you'll see it shows up as just one track instead of two, but you can see both waveforms there. This is how a stereo file is going to look. So you can see it's got whatever the left audio is here and whatever the right audio is here. So we've got how to get audio from over here. We can use our normal set in and set out. All those commands normally work. We know how to modify the channels. I can, of course, edit this once it's in the timeline. So if I said, I want to put a cut here and delete this part, and I'm just going to keep this end, or I said, oh, actually I cut it too short. Let's stretch this out, and maybe I want these both to be the same length. Okay, now I've got something. And maybe here I, really like the way this lav track sounded.
Hey.
The hey is nice and clean. So I'm going to keep that, and maybe I want a little bit of this background noise, but not so much, because if I just play those, let me mute this music track for a second.
Hey.
That background track is pretty loud there, so maybe what I'll do is I'm just going to stretch this out. You can see when I stretch a track out, I got this white line in it, and this is a volume line, so I can take this and I can adjust the volume level, and you will see, let me zoom in on this a bit. See down towards the bottom of my screen, it tells me how much I'm adjusting it. So if I go above 0, it means I'm raising it. So right now I'm raising it 6.6 decibels. If I go below 0, it means I'm lowering it. So I just want a little bit of that background in. I'm going to drop that down pretty low.
Hey.
You can even go down a little more. So this is one thing I can do, is adjust the volumes of things relative to each other.
Hey.
Okay, so now I've got that, and that sounds a little bit better to me than when I just had
Hey.
the hey without a little bit of background noise. This is obviously a creative decision. You do what you want to do and how you want your project to sound, but I can adjust these levels relative to each other. I can also adjust them over time. So this is what's called keyframing. So let me bring this up here, and let's say maybe we wanted it to start with a lot of background noise, and then that background noise kind of gradually goes away subtly so that we can hear the voices better. Maybe we don't want to start quite that high. We'll start down here. So I can select my pen tool here, or hit P for that. And you'll notice when I get it over this white line, it shows up with a little plus. So here's the normal pen tool, and I get close there and it gets a plus. So I can click on that, and it makes a little diamond or hexagon shape there. Or if you zoom way out, it just looks like a little blue dot. And if I've just made that one dot, I haven't really accomplished anything. If I go to here, change the volume, it's still going to change the volume the same way. If I make a second one, now what I can do is adjust them independently of each other. So I can pull this one down, and what I'm telling Premiere is start with the volume up here, and then over this period of time, gradually the volume is going to go down to here. And we should be able to hear that.
Hey.
Okay, so you heard it started loud. I'll make this even more exaggerated.
Hey.
And so maybe that's a little much for the creative effect I'm going for, but again, it's just a demo. Maybe it would go something like this.
Hey.
Where it started a little louder, and we just drop it down a little bit so that that voice can stand out better.
Hey.
We could also, of course, bring the voice up, raise the volume on that.
Hey.
Okay, and you heard when I bring that up, I'm actually starting to pick up a little bit more of that lav noise. I can hear some more of the clothes rustles and stuff with it.
Hey.
So that might be something where maybe I look at this and say, I really kind of only want to hear that around where the line is. Let me pull this down a little bit around here.
Hey.
Okay, now I put this background back in.
Hey.
Okay, so that's a basic tool. The other thing is, let's say I took another piece of audio here, and I'm just going to grab whatever this is and drop it right here. And just work with one track for a second. I'm going to delete these others. Okay. And we get to this point, and what we're going to hear is this obvious cut between one clip of audio and the next clip. Okay, so that doesn't sound great. Something else you'll sometimes hear, depending on where you've put this cut, is you might get like a pop or a click or something. And there are a bunch of ways around that, but one of the easiest ones is just put in a little crossfade between these two and say, hey, kind of fade out the volume on this one while the other one fades in. So let me show you where our audio transitions are, because this is another useful thing to know about. Those are going to be in my effects tab. Now, one thing I can do is I can go up here to my work mode. Right now I'm in an editing mode, and I could switch into an effects mode, and that will bring up my effects over here so I can find them. I could also go into an audio mode since I'm working in audio right now. And here it actually has some built-in sounds that I can use as part of this. I can find my effects over here. If I click on effects, those show up. But you can see where we've adjusted the volumes here. This is, think of this like a giant mix board. And you can see that I've brought the audio down at this point on this track, and you can see them adjust with my keyframes. So this track right here is this one audio 4 that kind of starts at this level and then hits the keyframes and goes down a little bit to pull down that background. Then you can see my dialogue here from that lav going up and back down. So this is another way to control these other than just using your pen tool. But let me go back to editing mode. Another place I can find this is just right over here in my main project window. Go to effects, and here are all my effects. And you can see there are audio effects, there are audio transitions. And easiest way to do this is I'm just going to grab a constant power audio transition, and I'm going to put it right between these two clips. And this is basically going to be like a dissolve, except it's an audio dissolve. Okay, and there's a huge level mismatch between those two, so that's part of why this is so obvious. If I adjust those so they're a little closer. You never heard that hard cut, right? If I take this out, you heard that sharp cut. If I put this back in, it's fading the two into each other so we don't get that. I could also even stretch this out, make it a little longer, so it's a little smoother. This is something you'll want to play with. One thing to note about this is it does mean, since I'm dissolving across this whole time, it means whatever was in this clip is actually going to play through all the way to here. Whatever was in this second clip is going to start playing here. So there's a little bit that I had originally cut off that now is going to come back in. So you want to make sure to listen and hear what's going on here. In this case, since I just grabbed a random part of this, we actually hear somebody saying that the camera's rolling. That maybe I wouldn't have before. I think that actually might be. Yeah. So here's where the clip started. We pick up the end of it just as a zing. And now we've stretched this second clip out to the beginning. So we hear the whole word rolling. So you do want to be careful with these to make sure you don't accidentally bring in something you didn't want to. So now we've got that playing smooth. We've got some levels adjusted. We know what our mute and solos are. We talked about mono versus stereo. The last sort of audio basics thing I'd like to show you is audio effects. And this is something that I honestly almost would never do in Premiere, because there are programs that are really designed for working with audio, and you could do this stuff more in depth if you get more experience. And if you get into audio and you learn a program like Pro Tools or Logic or Digital Performer or something like that, you have a lot more control. But it's handy when you're starting out and there's no problem with using some of these, that you have some of these effects built into Premiere and can do some basic effects there. So if you look here, I have a whole bunch of different effects. For something like our intro video production, I am not expecting you to use any of these or to get in and figure out what these all do. I'm just showing you that they're there. So if you're someone who's into audio and wants to play with them, you can. And I'll just show you one example of the type of thing you can do with this. So this music track I put up here, first off, if this starts playing, it's going to be really loud, which is why I've had it muted. Okay, that's just drowning everything else out. So we know what to do. I need to adjust the volume here. If I don't see that little white volume band, I'm just going to stretch out the track. So I'll go to the bottom of the track and just stretch it down like this, and it'll show up. And let's pull this down somewhat so it's not drowning everything out.
Hey.
Okay, so now we've got some background noise. And one thing you definitely want to play with in sound and you want to think about is relative volume. So right now,
Hey.
still kind of dominating things. Maybe that's what I want. I still hear the hey, but I kind of lost a lot of this background noise. If I want it to sound like it's really more distant, I could pull this even further down.
Hey,
If I split the difference, that's low enough you can hear it. That's almost too low.
hey,
Okay, so now we're kind of hearing all of those. Now, I'm not saying any of these is right or wrong. You've all seen movies or TV shows where there's times where all the sound drops out and they're just hearing music. There's times where there might be music and then it entirely drops out and you're just hearing the ambient sound and the character voice and stuff like that. So there's not a right or wrong way to do this. It's think about what is your piece asking for? What are you trying to do with the sound here? But as I wanted to show you an example and effect, and I'll just do a really simple one because it's one of my favorites, which is just, let's say, I'm going to pull this back up so we can hear it better. It's a little too loud. Okay, and let's say I actually want this to kind of sound like there's some car there and it's like playing, booming through the car stereo rather than being sort of score here. So that sound of where it's kind of like, when a car drives by and it's got the music thumping and you kind of hear that sound. It sounds different than this clean sound like this. There's a lot of processing we could do to do that, but a really simple one that's actually does a pretty good job of getting you most of the way there is I'm just going to throw on a low pass filter, meaning I want to keep all the low sounds and get rid of the high sounds to get that thump. So I'm just going to take this effect, drag it onto the clip there. Now it's on there. I don't know what the settings are. As with any sort of effect, I can always click on the clip or double click on it. And up here at the top, you'll see effect controls. I should point out this is something that's available for anything. So if I had a video clip in here and double click on that, it brings it up and I can see the effect controls here for things like if I wanted to change the scale of that or change its position on screen, things like that. So if I went here and said, yeah, let's make the scale bigger, it's going to zoom in on the shot. Let's take that back out, go back here, got this up. My effect controls, and you can say, oh, it has this low pass. Where do I want the cutoff to be? And this is something I'd have to adjust and see where I want it, but let's try something like that and see what that sounds like.
hey,
And you can hear the difference, right? Now it sounds like it's coming through a wall or something. I haven't quite got the car effect.
hey,
We can cut off even more.
hey,
And you're really just getting that kind of bass bump. Obviously, we could do a lot more with this with a more detailed audio program, but you can see even a simple little filter like that can accomplish something. And if this was like, hey, they're having a conversation and there's a party going on in the next room,
hey,
that's not that bad. That kind of achieves what we're going for and certainly gets the creative point across in terms of, basic introductory level stuff of what we're trying to do. So that's our quick intro to audio. We've got keyframing your audio and adjusting your levels. We've got throwing in transitions so you don't hear those hard cuts or clicks or pops at your cut points. And basics of throwing on an effect. Again, I don't expect you to play with effects in Premiere at an introductory level, but knowing they're there and it is something that's available to you if you want. And the last thing I will point out here, we were talking about relative levels of one sound to another. So how loud is this background sound versus this voice versus this music? One other thing you should pay attention to is over here on the right, you have these audio meters that are just showing you the overall volume of your whole project.
hey,
And you just want to keep an eye on this and make sure, A, that it's not like clipping off. So if I pulled this way up here, you can hear it distorting. And also I can see that's way above the 0 point. It's redlining here. That's telling me my audio is distorting. And it's possible, even if my original audio was fine, when I'm changing the volume here or putting an effect on it or layering a whole bunch of audio clips together, something that was fine can get too loud. So I do want to check this and make sure that's not happening.
hey,
This is pretty loud. I'm almost clipping there, so I still probably would want to bring my overall volume down some. In this case, it's, I think, the music that's driving that.
hey,
The other thing I want to look at is just over the course of my piece, if I play it through, making sure your volume levels are about the same. So let me mute this music for a second.
hey,
Okay, that line, hey, we saw was, peaked around -12 here. If later in the piece I'm having another conversation and their audio is peaking down here at like -36, and later I have another conversation and it's up here at like -2 or -3, that's just hard for your audience because they have to keep adjusting the volume level because you have things that are way quieter or way louder. So watching these is just a way of double checking that you're getting roughly consistent volume levels across your whole piece. And in like the sound design class, we talk about exactly where those levels should be. I'd say if your average peaking is somewhere in this range, that's good. And it's okay if there's something loud happens and it gets louder than that, or there's a quiet section and something's quieter. That's fine. That's actually great. That's playing with dynamics, using volume as another tool at your disposal. And it's perfectly fine and actually a really good creative tool to sometimes have things that are louder and sometimes have things that are softer. But you want your sort of average stuff, like if you have a bunch of scenes that are people in rooms talking, just as an example, and they're not whispering and they're not yelling, it's just sort of normal conversational level, you don't want those scenes to all be at different levels. You want those scenes to be about the same, and then things that should be louder than that are louder, and things that should be quieter are quieter. But just watching this, and I would play through my whole piece and make sure wherever I want, I guess I'm sort of past my dialogue there.
Hey.
Okay, so again, my peaking of my dialogue here was about -12. And so I'm going to say, okay, I want maybe whenever people are talking, that's where I want the kind of average levels to be. Or maybe I want it louder, because actually I did want this music in here, and I probably want it lower than I had it.
Hey.
As I'm adding more things in, my overall volume is going to add up, and I just want to watch this scale to make sure A, things aren't clipping, they're not getting over the top, and B, over the length of my piece, the average levels are staying about the same relative to where I'd like them. So things that should sound the same volume are the same, and it's not that scenes at the beginning of my movie are quiet and then my ears were getting tired, so as the movie goes on, they get louder and louder. That as I watch the movie, imagine your audience could set the volume at some comfortable level and they can hear things sounding about right at that level. So that's where I can use these meters.
Hey.
Okay, and you can see I added the music in a little bit, and that bumped my overall level just up here a little bit because it's adding all these things together. It's still in a decent enough range. Okay, so that's our audio stuff. Hope that was helpful. Good luck on your audio.